Now we are going to have a kind of discussion section where we are going to analyze Bootstrap based on different criterias and discuss it. For example, we defined the 5 criterias in how to select a web framework, and now we are going to see how Bootstrap addresses each of them. For example, for the learning curve, we can see that basic knowledge of HTML and CSS is required, so it can easily be learned. And in terms of productivity, so there are a lot of helper classes and reusable components are available along with templates. So this allow you to generate your website in a very fast manner, and you can websites can be generated easily. So and in terms of performance, Bootstrap is lacking a bit because Bootstrap does not provide you any option to customize the CSS and JavaScript file that you are generating from the Bootstrap website. So you always get all the Bootstrap package, so it contains everything. That's why it is considered a bit of heavy, because for example in your project you might not need all the components, so having all these components available in Java in a CSS file is a kind of is a big thing. So other related, for example, frameworks like I think Material UI, Foundation, they provide kind of customization option that allows you to generate a kind of very specific CSS which meets the requirement of your project. That's why it's considered a bit heavy. In terms of scalability, since it's just a kind of CSS framework, so this factor does not really apply to Bootstrap. Okay, in terms of security vulnerability, I think it's a kind of it has a large community, and there are a lot of bug fixes and updates which are frequently coming. So it like it can be seen as a kind of secure system where with very less bugs. So in terms of pros and cons of the Bootstrap, we can see that the some of the good pros is that it supports mobile support. So it has a kind of mobile support. It allows you to rapidly develop good projects, pre-built components and templates, so a lot of possibilities of customization are available. I think the grid system is a very robust system which allows you to kind of customize your layout in a very structured and systematic manner, wide variety of template and a kind of different so since it's being used by a lot of companies, and that's why it's had a large community, and it is complete constantly being updated. So that's very good advantage of using Bootstrap in your project. However, the kind of cons is that it's considered relatively heavy, and it does not work with JavaScript disabled. For example, we see that you have an option to disable JavaScript in your browser. For example, in that case, for example, most of the functionalities of the Bootstrap will not work. So trying to compare Bootstrap with some similar technologies, here we are going to discuss with one similar technology, which is Foundation. It is also another great CSS framework, and it provides almost the same feature as Bootstrap. It has its own grid system which is called XY grid system, and there are a lot of templates and components available. It's a kind of relatively new framework, but it's growing, and it has a high emphasis on the mobile first web design architecture with lot of customization available. So if we try to compare this with Bootstrap, we can see that there are a lot of similarities. For example, it has mobile first. It is also using RAMs as basic unit. Similar, it has kind of lot of similarities, but it has some own differences also. We are not going to go into detail, but they are using some different grid system. So Bootstrap uses this flexible grid system, but it uses XY grid system. Customization. So for example, Bootstrap provide a lot of pre-built component and a lot of additional classes and components that you can use, so you don't need much customization there unless you want to make a unique styled component out of it. But Foundation, on the other hand, it provides a basis for the developer to work on, so the customization is required for it to work. In terms of preprocessor, so kind of Bootstrap support both LESS and SAS preprocessor, but in terms of Foundation, it only support SASS. And design, yeah, I think Bootstrap has a very kind of variety of designs available, and it allows you a lot of customization. On the other hand, the default look and feel of Boot Foundation is still kind of can still be considered as less in terms of design compared to Bootstrap, but since it provides a lot of customization, you can do a lot of it. But of course it requires a lot of work from the developer itself. And for the community, both of them have a community, and but since Bootstrap is older and it's being used by a lot of high big companies, so it has a wider community with a lot of more plugins as compared to Foundation. So finally, the last section would be where we provide a kind of guideline of how to set up a boot and start a Hello World project. So for the first step is setting up environment. There are two options. You can download the whole package, JavaScript, CSS, and include it in your project, which should be the preferred way of doing web application, because if you try to link it from a kind of online resources, so this way it can get kind of for example, if the resources are not available due to some reason on the external server, then your project will not work. So you should always try to download the resources and include it in your project. So you can go to the Bootstrap website, and then there is you can directly download the whole package from there. Additional, what you need to include in your project is jQuery, which is not included in this Bootstrap bundle that you come. So you have to manually download jQuery and install it. So a side note which you need to consider here is that the current version of the Bootstrap 4.4.1 is not fully working with the latest version of jQuery, which is 3.5.0. So I would recommend you to use Bootstrap jQuery version 3.4.1. Otherwise, some popovers and drop down menus will not work. Okay, so you can also install these instead of downloading. You can use some package managers like npm, yarn, NuGet, and how to use them is also available on the download page of the Bootstrap. So in order to use them, for example, you have to include two things: a CSS file. For example, you should use bootstrap.min.css, and then you need to include JavaScript files. So, and in the JavaScript file you have jQuery first, you need to include that, and then you can include this bootstrap.bundle.min.js. Now there are a couple of JavaScript files available. So the mainly you will either use bootstrap.min.js or bootstrap.bundle.min.js. The only difference is that if you are not going to use drop down menus or popovers of these kind of things in your project, then you can use the simple bootstrap.min.js. Otherwise you have to use bootstrap.bundle.min.js, or there is another option that you use bootstrap.min.js, but you have to then add another project which is popper.js, and then you have to add this popper.min.js also in your project above Bootstrap JavaScript file. But yeah, for most of the cases you can use the bundle file. And the other option is to link your resources via CDN link, and then here are the links available for the latest versions of the Bootstrap. These links are also available on the Bootstrap web page. This will allow you to get access this Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript file directly from the internet without including them. And with this is a kind of hello world page, and then for example containing, so you need to add your CSS, then you have a body section, and you should usually add your jQuery and Bootstrap bundle at the end of the page. And then if you try to run this code, you will get a kind of hello world example running using bootstrap.min.js framework. And this is the version which we used to start our project, and we added our component to it.